What I'm holding in my hand is revolutionizing the way we can connect ourselves with the world around us. It simultaneously demonstrates how we're different and unique, and specifically, it can prove to be a game changer in identifying the remains of the First Nations children who experienced the former residential schools across Canada. But few people know about this technology, and I think the story needs to be told. This is referred to as a chip, and it's part of a rapid DNA system made by a US company called ANDE. Rapid means fast, and rapid DNA does three things quickly. It determines that a DNA sample is human, male or female, and unique, because there is no two people that are exactly alike in the world. It doesn't say if you're going to get Parkinson's disease or whether your parents were Irish or Cree, but it does tell you three things needed to confirm identity. So how did a singer-songwriter get involved with a rapid DNA company? Well, ANDE CEO George Heinrichs and I share a belief that storytelling matters. And so 2 years ago, he hired me for a 6-month contract to ensure all of ANDE's successes were archived and accurate. Because if you are the expert in anything, you want to have the stories to back up that expertise. Otherwise, you look and sound like everybody else. So while I don't work for ANDE any longer, I know all of their stories, and I know this will be of value to the First Nations community if identifying the remains is a priority. There's a beginning, middle, and an end to every story, and this technology follows the same pattern. And so I'll give you an extremely simplified version of how this works. In the beginning of the story, you have this swab. It looks a little bit like a Q-tip and kind of works the same way. You rub it on a sample like a bone or a tooth or inside of somebody's cheek. And you take this swab and you insert it into one of the chambers of the chip and lock it in. And each chamber represents a single DNA test, so this chip can handle 5 swabs, so it can handle 5 DNA tests at once. Then you have the middle part of the story. In the middle, that's where all the exciting stuff happens, and everything in this system happens inside the chip. The DNA never leaves it. The chip gets inserted into a slot of a portable machine called an instrument, and the DNA gets cleaned and copied and pushed through this chip so that by the time it gets to the end around here, there's like a train of DNA that passes by a laser looking for 27 specific markers called loci. In the end, the instrument analyzes the findings and gives a red X or a green check mark to each of the 27 loci. Now, they don't need a perfect 27 out of 27 score to identify someone, but if it gives that perfect score, the results are so accurate that there is only a 1 in a trillion chance they're wrong. The whole process takes less than 2 hours, and it can occur right there at the grave sites right now. ANDE is leading the way in rapid DNA technology, and there's nobody else that can do what they do as well as they do it. It's only starting to catch on in Canada. The RCMP have an instrument or two. Edmonton Police have committed to one, and that's about it. Private labs don't have this. So this is a technology brand new to Canada and most of the world. ANDE has clear advantages over the traditional way of processing DNA samples. But in this particular case of the residential school remains, the most significant advantage ANDE offers involves privacy. Not only can ANDE identify the remains on site without having to disturb the remains unnecessarily, they can do it more cheaply and more reliably and more quickly than traditional labs. But there is the issue of security around reference samples for DNA. For remains to be identified, you need to connect the DNA of the deceased person with the DNA of known relatives, which means that those survivors need to agree to have their DNA taken. And understandably, there's little trust between the First Nations community and Canadian authorities here. So having survivors donate a DNA sample to a government database may be concerning. But fortunately, ANDE can create a private database for the single purpose of identifying the children. The First Nations or their trusted third-party partners can control who sees the DNA information on a closed and encrypted system, and then ANDE's private software can compare DNA to look for connections and determine if relationships exist. It can handle the job end to end, and I think that's huge. I'm a proud father of 2 boys, and I can't imagine what it would be like to have them taken away, mistreated, and perhaps die, to be left buried in unmarked graves. I can't imagine what that would be like. But I do know that I'd never let their names be forgotten. And if remains were ever discovered and there was a possibility that some of them might belong to my son, I'd want to know for certain, and I'd want to know as soon as possible. I'd want my children to have their identity back because our names tell the world that we were here, that we lived, and that we mattered. we continue to matter to the people we leave behind. And that's why I know this chip is so important and what it can do. I can help restore the names to the children just by telling you about it. I'm not a scientist, but I know what this scientific invention can do. And I feel like I have a responsibility to tell people what I know and hope the stakeholders in charge might become curious enough to learn more about it. If anyone watching this can connect ANDE to a decision maker, please send them my way and I'd be honored to make the appropriate introductions. If you're interested in learning more yourself, visit their website. Go to ande.com, ANDE.com. And thanks for engaging.